my fellow comic book collectors. It's Alan, the Comic Collector Geek, and I've been thinking about what I said a few months ago. I made a really bold prediction about the comic book market. I said by October that the comic book market would go from a buyer's market to a seller's market. So we're not that far away now. It's getting kind of close. I'm getting a bit nervous about my prediction, actually, because right now it's still a buyer's market. The books that I'm seeing are still going down. The prices are going down. Overall, I'm seeing weakness in the market. And it's even more than just weakness. So what I've seen is a lot of the pricing that, like from Silver Age, and even in the little bit in the Golden Age. Golden Age is a little bit of a special story, but especially in the Silver, that the prices have really returned to either pre-COVID pricing of 2020 or are on the same trend line as they had been prior to COVID. So what I mean by that is a lot of the comics that when they overcorrect, they go back to the 2020 pricing or even below that, which is an overcorrection. But some have kind of stabilized along where the trend would have been. So if you had sort of projected out like 2 or 3 years based on the previous trend lines of prior to 2020, the comics are on those same trend lines. So that's a good sign. That's actually a good sign. It means that the prices are going up. They're not anywhere close to the COVID numbers. The COVID numbers are insane. Like, they were insane. For those who don't remember COVID era of comic book pricing, it was basically like you buy a book, next week you flip it for double. Then a week later you flip it again for double. It was just craziness. It was, you were seeing, like, I saw some books with 10x kind of levels of inflation, and that's not realistic. That's not sustainable. So the COVID pricing was a little bit insane. And I even did a video back then saying, hey, these prices are insane. This is not going to stay. We're going to, and I actually predicted the collapse of the COVID market fairly accurately. So a few months ago, I made another bold prediction, which was to say, hey, look, what's going to happen with this current market? We've been in sort of this massive decline since 2022, 2023, really. And what's going to happen? It's been a few years. Is it going to ever recover? Are we going to see the end of the comic book market forever? And I made a prediction based on a few things that I saw. Generally, I think the U.S. economy is correcting right now. It's not corrected. It's not fixed yet. It's a bit of a mess, in my opinion. But I do see it correcting. A lot of money is coming back to the U.S. There's a lot of investment happening in the U.S., and that bodes well for the comic book marketplace. Comics are very U.S. centric, and what I mean by that is, yes, there's markets outside of the United States, and there's actually pretty big markets outside of the United States. Europe, lots of people buy comics. Canada, we buy comics. But the heart and soul of the comic book market is really the United States. It is the bulk of the comic book marketplace. And that's just the reality. So based on what happens in the United States, the other markets kind of get impacted. Regardless of whatever our economy, like Canada, our economy is destroyed right now. And it's not looking like it's going to ever recover in the near future. It's that bad in Canada. And I hear in Europe, it's kind of the same way. So the comic book market kind of has to be separate from that global market. And the only way to have it, like where I see it as separate, is the fact that it is such a US based market. that's bodes well for comics in a way. Maybe not so good if you're outside of the United States and not benefiting from a booming market. But you know, I guess we can, instead of, we can sell our comics for bread in the other countries. I don't know. It's gonna be a pretty crazy time. But yeah, so I do see a resurgence of the U.S. market, but it is a slow recovery. It's much slower than I expected. I'm still gonna hold to my October October time frame that it's gonna change to a buyer's market, because what I do see, and this is one of the reasons what I said earlier in the previous video, as I said, I do see the U.S. market recovering. That was one major point. But one of the other major points was, one of the things that was killing the comic book marketplace was that people were dumping bigger books. And they were dumping them maybe because they needed the money, or they needed, there was a bit of that desperation I could see in the market, or they were just getting out of comics altogether. And that really tanked the market in 2024 and 2023. Those years were really bad, really bad. But there's only so much loss people are willing to endure. Like, if I have big books, I'm not going to put them up to market if I know that I'm going to get a small fraction of what I paid for them. It doesn't make sense. You don't do it. You find something else to sell. And what I've seen is that diversification of the market in terms of what people are willing to give up. And that's why, if you look at the last couple Silver Age videos that I did, I was actually looking at kind of the more obscure books. Like, why is he looking at this book? Nobody cares about this book. But I was looking at these more obscure books because they were kind of highlighting elements of the market that other lists don't look at. And what I was really trying to look at and understand was how these more obscure books, like high grade, maybe run filler books, high grade, maybe not key books that most people think of, but are rare books, ones that don't come up for market very often, ones that you might not have seen for a few years on the marketplace, maybe not even had a sale since pre-COVID. How are those books performing? And the reason I like those more obscure books, those little outlier books, is they kind of reflect a strange overall impression of the market. Because if an obscure book sells for more, or creates, even has a record, and some of them did have records, that shows that there is some strength to the market. It shows that people that are still wanting to buy comics and buy these ones that you just can't attain normally, and that the fact that collectors are ready to pony up for some obscure book shows that there is that strength. Because ultimately, one of the big driving forces behind collectors is FOMO. During a buyer's market, there is still that FOMO feeling that maybe the buyer's market will end. And if you, like, when I was buying, me buying Golden Age books, there was a lot of books that I hadn't seen for forever. and then they were coming to market, and I'm like, oh, I got to get it before somebody else snatches it up, and then you don't see it for another 20 years. It's kind of that feeling of, so these obscure books kind of embrace that FOMO feeling. And that really taps into the mindset of the community, of the comic book collector community, more so than another AF-15 or ASM 300 or some Avengers 1 or so the books that are more commodified and you see all the time. So these are more the FOMO, that real desire. How much drive is there in the comic book community, and how much money are people willing to set aside just to go after some random book? So I was seeing some positivity there, and that was, to me, hopeful. One other thing, as I was saying, is like, because people are kind of holding back a lot of their bigger books. These ones that they are letting go are the more obscure ones, and as a result, we're seeing, you know, if you go like a month without seeing an AF15, like a Amazing Fantasy 15, you might think, hey, maybe this book is getting more rare and obscure. It's there's still the demand. So people holding back their books a bit can create that false scarcity that can bring the numbers back up again. And I think people are doing that a little bit. I still see, pretty much, it used to be like I would see 2 or 3 Amazing Fantasies sell per week. It was really that crazy. It seemed like they were just coming up. They'd have like a couple on Heritage, couple on like Comic Connect or Comic Link or somewhere. There would always seem to be one circulating for sale on a weekly basis and had a sale on a weekly basis. Now I'm seeing it every 2 to 3 weeks. So that shows that people are holding them back a little bit, at least a little bit. As I said, that in a way bodes well for the market because it can create that false sense of scarcity. And that is the same scarcity that exists for these obscure books that I was talking about, because they are ones that people will buy and just put in their collection, and they'll never see the light of day till many years later, where that person says, okay, I don't want to, I want to sell something, that I think I can win on, and that's what they'll do. And generally they do. That was the pattern that I saw, that the more obscure books, the ones that are high grade, the ones that you just don't see very often, have been selling. So that bodes well for the market. Now, will I be right about October? I'll push it to maybe the end of October. But I'm still seeing that we're transitioning. I think we hit that bottom in 2024, where we kind of had it, where it got to that kind of bottom, and a lot of things are still bouncing on that on the floor in terms of their values. But I think we've hit that bottom, and we're seeing some moving up, but not much. I still think the market's pretty weak, to tell you the truth. So we have a long ways to go till October, but a lot can change in that time period. One of the things that I hear, and again, I have to talk about the U.S. economy in order to really address this, because it's beyond the comic book community. It's beyond us. We don't set the U.S. economy, right? At the end of the day, it's the greater U.S. economy that is impacting every other, especially the collectible things, because collectibles are like seen as not as an investment the way other assets are, like stocks or bonds or something like that. There is the element of these are luxuries, and because of that, the fact that there is just, even if we do see them as an investment personally, and we do try to use them in that asset kind of class way, they're still seen as a luxury. Okay, it's just the way it is. We always talk about, oh, it's a good investment. No, they're a luxury that have some asset component to them, but they're not fully that way. And because of that, people will focus on things that will hold wealth more so than luxuries, and they'll see them as luxuries. So they'll hold back on spending on those, where when the economy is weak, they will generally hold back on luxuries. That's just generally the way people behave. Now, I'm seeing big books still sell. I'm not saying the market is dead completely, but what can change the market from a buyer's market to a seller's market is that overall feeling that, hey, I'm okay. If you feel like I'm okay, I'm gonna have a job, I'm gonna have money in the future, then you're more likely to spend money and buy like some luxury good. Okay, And I think right now the U.S. economy is not there yet in terms of the mental attitude of it. But you hear these deals where trillions of dollars are coming into the U.S., like from like Saudi Arabia, from Japan, from all these major contracts that are coming back to the United States, investments into the United States. That will trickle in. That will increase people's confidence. And it's really consumer confidence at the end of the day that will revive the comic book community. That's the big point. Now, I think that will kind of come in time for my prediction to be true. Another thing, and this is the one I'm really nervous about, is my prediction of October was really based on two movies. It really was based on the success or failure of two major movies. And that was the Superman movie and the Fantastic Four movie. The Superman movie, I actually feel is going to be a good movie. I have high confidence that it's going to be a good movie. The Fantastic Four movie, though, which is in some ways more important because the Marvel fan base has been a bit, is the majority of the comic book collectors. The Marvel kind of drives the market right now. It's the bigger portion. I can always compare DC keys versus Marvel keys. Well, Marvel keys are like 2 or 3 times more expensive than a DC key. That's because there's more market interest in Marvel than DC. I like DC better, but most people like Marvel better. Okay, so it is what it is. So if the Fantastic Four movie does well, it re-excites that Marvel fan base. If it does poorly, it's just another nail in the coffin of the MCU. And we've had just too many bad movies. Thunderbolts did okay, broke even, it wasn't a blockbuster. It really needed, it used to be that pretty much every Marvel movie was $1 billion movie. Now they're lucky if they make it to 500 million, which sounds like a lot of money, but when your budget is 200 million and you're spending another $200 million on marketing, you need to make a lot more money to make a profit. And then you also rev share with the theater, so you don't even get that 500 million that you made off the box office. You need to usually make 3x of your expenditure on the movie. So if you're spending 200 million on a movie, you need to make 300 million at the box office. 600 million at the box office. So really hard to make money, especially with these bloated budgets. So with that in mind, a lot of the Marvel movies aren't making the money back, and they're it used to be like Marvel was just gold. You just say, hey, it's a Marvel movie. Oh, okay, here's $1 billion. It was like that. Now the confidence isn't there. Still selling $500 million worth of movie tickets, big deal. That in the old standards would have been a blockbuster. In the standard of these bloated Marvel budgets, that's a loss. So, we need a win in order to re-engage the comic book community. Now, my fears around the Fantastic Four movie are becoming more and more apparent, I would have to say. I am hearing it's, got a bit of that girl boss element, which most Marvel fans don't like. It's less about Reed Richards and more about Sue Richards, and that's not going to bode well. They've nerfed Johnny Storm, made him not the womanizer, cocky guy that he really is. They don't understand the characters that they're writing the story about, and that makes me nervous. That makes me nervous. I'm not sure if this movie's going to be a hit. Also, they're doing things that I actually like and think are very bold things to do. Like they're making it retro. That's cool. I actually think the aesthetic of it looks really cool. I think that has a lot of potential, but if they do those risk things without balancing it out with other, you know, being true to the comic books themselves, and you know, really saying, "Hey, fans, we get you. We know what you like." If they don't do that, then it doesn't matter how cool they make the aesthetic look. If it's not a good movie, it's not a good movie. And that could just scare. That could really, you know, be another reason why the market just tanks even further. A good example to understand how that works is looking at the Eternals book. If you bought Eternals 1 back in the day, I think it was like $1,000 book before even the new movie announcement. And now it's like a $500 book. So the value of the book was actually hurt by the movie being produced. If the movie had never been produced, it would be probably a $1,500 book now. You know, it's like the movie actually killed the value of the book. And that's the fear, that if you keep on making Marvel bad movie after bad movie, and especially with these cornerstone characters, you could actually not just hurt the value of this one particular franchise, but the entire Marvel brand across the board. And that's scary. There's a lot riding on these two movies. I think the Superman movie looks pretty solid. It looks like it's going to be good. This Fantastic Four one, I'm not super confident about, and that's makes me nervous. And if you see that movie fail, you can expect a buyer's market to continue past my original prediction. Doesn't matter how strong the U.S. economy is, if you've pushed away your fans from just producing bad movie after bad movie, there's just it's not it's not going to help the market any at all. It's going to actually just push away more people from the market. One of the things that really made the market hot was the fact that the MCU was so exciting and really brought fans into the space. I'm just nervous. This is my prediction. You know, I was trying my best with the crystal ball, and you know, this is me being nervous about my crystal ball. I think there might be a crack in my crystal ball. I don't know. It really depends on those two movies. So those are some of my ideas. I was just, you know, I wanted to sort of do a little bit of a follow up, because you know, I posted that video like 5 months ago, 6 months ago, no, more than that. I posted it last year, predicting for this year. And this is my sort of mid reflection on it, and seeing, oh, I'm getting a little nervous about my own prediction. But we'll see. We'll see. Am I going to be right? And you'll you know, I'll see a whole bunch of comments like in November or October of this year, saying, "Oh, look how this aged." You're totally wrong, you know, or you're totally right. Hopefully, they'll say totally right, and that's what I'm aiming for. But you never know. Nobody's perfect. Yeah, I'm really hoping I'm right, but yeah, who knows? So, what are your predictions of the future? What do you think will happen? Do you think I'm going to be right? Or do you think the market is still going to suffer for a few more years? I'd love to hear your predictions about the comic book marketplace. Again, thanks for watching. Bye for now.